Alabama has produced some big-time quarterbacks in its program's history. Going back in time a little bit, there was a dude named A.J. McCarron who you probably remember. He will go down as one of the winningest college football quarterbacks of all time, and after him, we saw the rise of Blake Sims, Jake Coker, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, and most recently Mac Jones. There's a couple guys here and there that get forgotten about, but one in particular was supposed to be the future of Alabama football, the successor to A.J. McCarron, and the next great Crimson Tide player. Unfortunately, before things ever got started for him at Bama, he chose to leave, but he actually had a great career at his next school, helped his program have one of the best years in school history, and actually saved his career, which at first looked like it was headed toward being labeled as a bust. In today's video, we're going to talk about his rise as a player, his time at Bama, how he saved his college career, and what ultimately happened to him. But before we get into that, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, and I know we can do better than that, so be sure to hit that button, smash that like button for the algorithm, and let me know what player or topic I could do next. Now, let's get started. You're probably wondering who the subject of today's video is, and he is a forgotten Alabama quarterback by the name of Phillip Ely. He started his career with the Tide, but he eventually became a superstar for the Toledo Rockets, but in order to understand everything that went on, let's go back in time. Phillip Ely grew up in the Sunshine State, more specifically in the city of Tampa. He always loved football from a young age, and he was told he wasn't good enough from the beginning, as his high school coach had this to say. Quote, "The funny thing was that when he was younger, people looked at him and said he was so small that they didn't give him a chance. Phillip just has that it factor though, and he's got the personality that makes everyone around him better." Obviously, Phillip wanted to become a big-time quarterback, and he eventually grew into the frame necessary to make that happen, but he went to a high school that had produced a lot of talent and actually had a superstar quarterback ahead of him. At 15, he was 5'10" and a sophomore, and he was the backup quarterback to a guy known as Aaron Murray. You probably know him as he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, a 4-year starting quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs, and arguably the best quarterback in SEC history statistically. Murray is not the subject of today's video though, but his story becomes very important as he went down with a broken ankle in the second quarter of a 2008 game. At that point, everyone was worried that Plant's season was done as they were poised to make a state championship, but with Murray gone, it was suddenly in doubt. What did Eli do? He threw for 172 yards in the second half, and they won 44-28. This is the day his football career was born, and Phillip had this to say about it. Quote, "I haven't really had to battle with other guys for the position because it's been my spot since that moment. I got thrust into the fire, and it's just something that set my story off right there when Aaron went down. It's just been very different ever since." In Murray's absence, he threw for over 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns, but then Aaron would come back and lead them to a state title, but Eli was going to be a future star. He finished his high school career as a U.S. Army All-American and was the third straight quarterback from his high school to become an All-American. As a junior, he threw for nearly 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns and went 19-0 as a starter up to that point. When it came to recruiting, Phillip was a pretty big deal, as his top schools were LSU, Clemson, Wake Forest, Alabama, and Ole Miss, and he eventually decided to accept an offer from the Crimson Tide. He'd been very quiet about his recruitment process, but many believed that Eli was going to go to LSU. When asked about his decision to go to Alabama, which was a shocker, Eli had this to say. Quote, "You want to play for a program like that because they are the champions. The coaches and the players understand what it takes to win." Eli had the exact right mindset with that, but he was always seen as sort of an insurance policy to Alabama. 247 Sports thought he was solid though. According to them, he was a high 3-star quarterback, the number 17 pro-style quarterback, and the 553rd best player in the class of 2011. Eli would be headed to Tuscaloosa with a chip on his shoulder, and maybe he could be as good as the guy before him, Aaron Murray. At the time when Eli arrived at Alabama, he was the 4th quarterback on the roster behind A.J. McCarron, who was the star, Phillip Sims, and Blake Sims. He would not appear in a game in 2011, but in 2012, he'd actually get an opportunity to see the field. He'd make his first career action against Arkansas as he went 2 of 3 for 15 yards. The following week against Florida Atlantic, he ran the ball once, and then finally, he made his impact as against number 11 Mississippi State. The Tide won 38-7, so they threw Phillip into the game, and he completed a pass for 27 yards in his first and only touchdown in an Alabama Crimson Tide uniform. After only appearing in 6 games, he decided to enter the transfer portal, and it was going to come down to USF, Illinois, Toledo, and Vanderbilt. Two of them were Group of 5, one was SEC and one was Big Ten, and he would eventually decide on the MAC and would trade away the sunny skies of Tuscaloosa for the cloudy gray skies of Toledo. Eli had taken to Twitter and said this, quote, "I'm ready to make a change in my life for the better, and I thank everyone who has supported me through this process. Go Rockets." His dad offered his opinion on the matter and had this to say, quote, "The MAC is an up-and-coming conference, as Northern Illinois went 12-2 and faced Florida State in the Orange Bowl, and Ohio was ranked for much of the year. Toledo's program would get better when he arrived, as at the time the head coach was actually a dude by the name of Matt Campbell, who you're more than likely familiar with." He recognized that there was something different about Eli. He said, quote, "It was almost like we gained a coach. I can remember through the season he's here late at night. He's not a starter, he's watching film. That tells you the kind of kid he is and the foundation he comes from." By the time 2014 had rolled around, Eli finally got the chance to win the starting job. He threw for 4 touchdowns in his first game against New Hampshire, and then on one play, everything fell apart. He tore his ACL and his labrum in his throwing shoulder, and he was done for the year. He had surgery in September of 2014 and January of 2015, and it would be a long road back to recovery. Eli said, quote, "None of those things are planned. No one is ever ready for it. There was a time when it was a goal of mine just to be able to walk around, then to run, then to take a drop back pass." During that time period, Logan Woodside would become the starting quarterback, and he actually eventually went to the NFL, but Phillip would beat him out once again and took over the starting job. At that time, he had never looked back and would finally save his career. Going into 2015, the Rockets were one of the better Group of 5 programs in the nation, led by Matt Campbell. Guys like Kareem Hunt and Deontay Johnson were also on the roster, and apparently the culture was a lot like what Eli came from. Phillip compared it to Nick Saban and had this to say, quote, "Matt Campbell's trying to create a culture and a tradition that will change the way things are done here. At Alabama, I wasn't the tallest guy or the strongest, so I had to get ahead in the film room and stuff like that, but I learned how to prepare for games. I learned what's important to be on an elite team, and I've used everything I've learned there and in high school, and I'm still trying to prove to people that we're a good team and all those type of things. I love being the underdog, it's what I live for." To start out the year, Eli and the Rockets would have 2 humongous games. The first matchup was on the road against number 18 Arkansas, and the Razorbacks were expected to be a big-time team. Eli threw for nearly 300 yards and a touchdown as the Rockets went on the road and won 16-12 against the Razorbacks, and this was one of the biggest upsets of the year. In week 2, Iowa State would come to town, and in what became a thriller, they beat the Cyclones 30-23 in double overtime. Eli threw 300 yards in a win over Arkansas State, and after leading them to victories over Ball State, Kent State, Eastern Michigan, and UMass, the Rockets were 6-0 for the first time in a long time, were ranked in the AP Top 25, and Eli was winning football games. Sadly, he would throw 2 interceptions in their loss to Northern Illinois, but they still would beat Central Michigan and Bowling Green as they get out to a 9-1 record. They finished the year with a loss to Western Michigan, but they were good enough to get selected to play in the Boca Raton Bowl. From there, they'd play against another Cinderella team in the number 24 Temple Owls, and to finish the year, Eli would throw 300 yards and 2 touchdowns as they upset the number 24 Owls. In his final year of collegiate football, Eli threw for 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 10 picks, as he was also named an All-MAC selection and actually got a couple invites to both the Tennessee Titans and Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall camps. He would not end up making it to the NFL, and he would go straight into coaching. He spent some time at Tiffin University, Western Carolina as a quarterbacks coach, and he even spent some time with the Iowa State Cyclones. It looks like Eli is all in on college coaching, and I really hope he can eventually get to the top and be his own coach someday. While he didn't do a whole lot at Alabama and at one point was expected to be the successor to A.J. McCarron, his time in a Crimson Tide uniform was short-lived, but he had a great finish to his career and left a legacy at Toledo. I remember watching those Rockets teams back when Matt Campbell was there, and they were a lot of fun to watch. That upset over Arkansas was great, and they became one of the best schools in the MAC while he was there. He never gave up, and I think he's going to have a very bright future in coaching. What do you guys think, though? Do you remember Phillip Ely? Who was another forgotten Alabama player? What topic should I do next? And who is a player who became a bust? Let me know down in the comment section. Hit that like button if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.